Welcome to the Miscellaneous Film Festival podcast. This is an excerpt from our mini film fest, Movies Close to My Heart, presented by friend of the show, Dustin Bartolucci. To hear the full episode, click on the link in the description. And now, on with the show.
I could have picked Annie Hall, by the way. I came really close. But
that would not have fit in this. You did really great. I think your playlist is really wonderful.
Well, thank you.
And I was really excited by everything you picked because I had not seen most of them. The only thing I had seen was Jacob's Ladder.
Okay,
shit, really?
Yeah.
And Kristen gave me a heads up. She's like, okay, you're gonna have a rough time with some of this stuff. And I
really
These fucking spoilers, man. I don't get it.
She's looking out for me.
I know.
The one I had seen was Jacob's Ladder, and so I did kind of write it off at first. Like, I'm going to work hard to understand and read about these, but Jacob's Ladder, I know I can just put on, I'll watch it through, and I'll reference what I know already.
Right.
But I realized I didn't.
Yeah.
I did deep dives into all of these, and I was surprised how deep I had to go into Jacob's Ladder
Yeah.
to understand it.
It aged well for you?
I would call Jacob's Ladder a timeless movie.
Yes.
Because it deals with something so abstract that the period it's set in, the period it was filmed in, doesn't really matter. And actually, you could hate this movie. You can misunderstand it, as so many people on Reddit did.
I can only imagine.
I can see why so many people would understand it and not like it,
Yes.
would like it and misunderstand it.
Yep.
Yes.
I had a very similar reaction because I saw it. I was a big horror movie buff when I was a teenager.
It's not a horror movie.
It's not a horror movie, and I saw it in a chunk of like Stephen King movies,
Right.
which I love him very much, but he's very literal and surfacey in his storytelling.
Yes.
Yes.
So Jacob's Ladder, when I saw it the first time in that chunk, I'm like, okay, he's just dead. That's it. But that's definitely not what's going on there. There's quite a bit more, and I would argue like maybe some actual time travel going on. Like, how much of that was real, or was it an entire dream, or is it all abstract? Like, that's the really interesting.
I think Dustin and I have answers for that.
Let's get into it.
So this is Jacob's Ladder from 1990, directed by Adrian Lin. It stars Tim Robbins and a whole bunch of other people. I'm not going to list everyone else in it, but it is kind of a who's who, a nice little time capsule movie.
Yes.
The synopsis is basically, after returning home from the Vietnam War, veteran Jacob Singer is haunted by flashbacks and surreal visions, not of this world. And that was the most vague synopsis I could find that didn't lean into interpretation.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
just stick to, like, these are things you
That's
will
how
see.
I introduce it as well, right? Like, you don't want to give anything away of what the function is to the story.
I feel
Because
like
that synopsis is not what the story is about.
Correct.
But you'd also have to go into it blind, I think, for it to work on you. Because
Yes.
if you go into it expecting to be kind of like I did when I was a teenager and saw it, like, okay, he's just dead at the end and none of it was real, and he woke up and it was all a dream. Is the original way that I interpreted that, and it cheapened it quite a bit.
I imagine that would. I'm glad I watched it later in life, actually.
Yeah.
Because I watched it, I was at least 25 when I saw it. So I didn't see it in high school or when I was younger. Because I watched a lot of R-rated movies before I was 10, but this was not one of them. And I probably wouldn't have appreciated it at all.
Right. And one thing I was referring to when I said, like, people on Reddit kind of not understanding the full concept of the movie, calling this a drug movie or like a Vietnam drug experience, an LSD kind of thing, you know. And the little caption at the end.
That's the only flaw in the movie for me.
Thank you so much.
Is it?
Oh
Yes.
my goodness.
Yeah.
I would love to take that back too.
Me too.
For similar reasons, I suspect.
I watched a lot of behind the scenes. Fortunately, like, it being the 90s, it was keen to show you behind the scenes special effects specials. So
It's also so 1990 in the best way.
It is. But you had the writer and you had the director explaining things, and, like, we'll tell you what it is.
Right.
And Adrian Lin, he brought the whole Vietnam plot line to the script. It was not in the original script.
Right.
He brought the whole drug message thing to the script. And I went back and forth about how much I disliked those. I got into a thread of someone saying, you could have just cut the whole drug thing out of the movie because that was a red herring and it was distracting. But when I finished it and thought about it more, I realized distraction, red herring, is part of
It's
Jacob's
his predicament.
experience.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
Absolutely.
is a thing.
It's a part of his, it's like a purgatory that he's in.
Yes.
It is literally a purgatory that he's in. Kind of like in After Hours. What is the thing that keeps this guy going to all these different scenarios?
Right.
Yeah.
For Jacob, it is trying to fight back, trying to struggle.
Right.
And everyone keeps telling him, if you just let go,
Right.
you would get to move on,
Yeah.
or then your pain would stop. But he's like, no, there's a struggle I need to finish. And that's why the drug thing works, because when he finds out that it's all true, you were drugged. That's why there was violence. That's what you experienced.
Right.
Yeah.
The problem is it's so easy to misinterpret that as he's hallucinating this whole thing.
Yeah, I definitely believe the way to understand it is allegorically, the drug portion of the movie.
Yeah.
It's an allegory for his acceptance, right? And this is not an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Now, the first of those movies are great. I really like the early Shyamalan, but they're very twist-oriented. This movie I've heard called kind of like a pre-Shyamalan twist movie. But I think that's a cart. I think that's a cart before the horse, because the twist in this movie is actually very unimportant. It's the journey that matters, not the end.
Yeah.
And
that's one reason that I love, because I looked up similar things, and the original script was much more, the demons were literal, like it was literally going through the 7 circles of hell.
Right.
It wouldn't have worked.
Absolutely.
I think, that way.
You need the veneer of the Vietnam story,
and you need the bits like, oh, okay, you really were like drugged. This isn't on you. Like it all makes sense now. And then you need Danny Aiello coming in and like giving you a nice massage and a bag straightener,
and just telling him everything. Danny, I wrote down even the smallest quotes where he's like, hey, just relax, let go, pain will go away, you can move on. One funny thing about his chiropractic scenes is a fun little bit. Every time Danny Aiello says, all right, turn on your right, he goes, wait, nope, your other right. I'm like, oh cool, Jacob always turns to the sinister side.
Yes.
The left.
Oh shit! Yeah.
He was told to go right. Take the right hand path here, and that is such a.
It's a nice detail.
It's so minor. If you're looking for it and you find it, good for you. I hope you enjoy it. But otherwise, it doesn't mean anything.
Correct. Yeah.
It's not like, oh my goodness, if he had turned right on the chiropractic table, then he would have gone to heaven. Like Hulk would have just popped up out of the floor.
Yeah.
This is one reason why I really enjoyed the rewatch of it, is that when I read it in a very literal sense, I didn't like it at all. But when I read it more like Slaughterhouse-5 almost.
Absolutely.
That's, I think, what it reminds me the most of, where there's the war trauma in there, and there's that sense of time travel, but you're still trapped back in the horror and the trauma of the time. And I mean, I like to look at it on several levels. Like, part of that really happened, like he went all the way through so that he was able to talk to the guy who started the experiment that fucked him up and actually killed him. And then he went all the way back, which, like, you know, you can interpret it that way, and you can interpret it absolutely abstractly in terms of 7 levels of hell moving on toward death kind of thing.
Yeah.
I was watching this and I kept hypothesizing, what if the script had fallen into David Cronenberg's lap?
Oh, he loves Cronenberg.
I do love Cronenberg. So I don't think it would have been as well directed, but it'd be so weird and interesting, though.
Much better visuals.
Probably.
The visuals were intentionally obfuscated in this, and that's part of why I said at the beginning, like, you can really hate this movie if you want to, because his intention was to do the horror thing, like, oh, don't show too much, leave it to someone's imagination. I went, I'm seeing not a flapping of demon wings, I'm just seeing a fucking blur. Like, oh my goodness, there's a tail there. It makes sense to me that there's a tail there. You showed too much of the... Oh, a horn pops out of her mouth. It seems like he's tripping out. And I think that's why the drug thing is needed, is because it can buttress against the actual... Again, I would take out the tagline at the end, because it's not needed.
Well, it also concretes it a little bit.
That's my problem with it. It justifies it when it's clearly not.
I want to have that clear solution.
It's there to show sympathy and draw attention to real things that happened. To go back just a little bit, this would be the moment in Network where someone says, ta-da, something bad happened, be upset about this. Except you put it in the wrong part of the wrong movie.
Of the definite wrong movie.
Where I'm watching this movie, I'm like, don't think this is about the suffering of Vietnam vets. It's very convenient at the time it was filmed to make it about a Vietnam vet, and that we would all be able to associate, oh, maybe he's tripping out on LSD because that happened in Vietnam or in the 70s, 60s and 70s.
It did.
But it gives this experience the real world references for it to exist for a man.
And that's because he believes that that's how it is.
Right. Yeah. And then we can see, okay, this human who would have had these kinds of experiences that I think I know about because I've seen movies. I saw Tropic Thunder, so I know what this is. And
pretty much.
Yeah. That's for us. That's not for the best of the film.
I agree. And there's a deleted scene that they cut out that I love.
Yeah.
And I would love to reinsert it just on my own time. It's when he actually takes the cure. Yeah. And this thing starts ripping itself through the ceiling trying to get him. Oh. And he's like he's not strapped to the bed, but it's like he's paralyzed.
Is that after he goes into the in the alleyway asylum, the hospital thing where there's limbs on the floor? Okay.
Right. And that actually leads me into two things I definitely want to bring up. First, Elizabeth Pena's performance in this, I love.
Oh. Yeah, she's great.
She has the wonderful nails down his back in the bed.
She plays Jezzy, his girlfriend.
Jezebel, right? And
let's be a little more blunt.
I know, right? And that's why I don't get people's literalist take of the movie. It couldn't be more clear. But she burns his pictures that he gets of his children. Yeah. Like she's trying to destroy his past in a way.
One reason you might dislike this movie is because the function of her character.
It is one-dimensional.
In his trauma. Oh, no. I was going to say it vacillates in so many ways. Like, she does seem to be doing things to help him, but also seems to be, there in the insane asylum doctor's office. And the director said she was put in that scene to see her aligned with the forces of darkness.
Right.
So it's hard to read, what she is at any given point.
Right.
Which makes me think that a misinterpretation of this movie would be to find individual characters and say, oh, this is an angel, this is a demon.
Yeah.
When the quote that this whole movie hinges on is that as you're dying, you will experience helpers stripping away your burdens.
And it will feel like devils tearing away at you.
If you hold on too bad, it'll feel like devils.
Yes.
If you're at peace, it will be angels setting you free.
Yes.
So at moments where maybe he is feeling at peace, she functions differently.
Right.
Because this is not an actual being with an actual agenda.
Yeah.
This is him experiencing either the illusion of him being stripped of his attachments or of helpers coming and him misinterpreting her motivations.
I love that.
Or she being presented to us as we're supposed to be empathizing with this character going on this journey.
I love that.
She's being presented to us in with vacillating motivations.
Right.
She burns the stuff, which is meant to seem like the most bitchy thing.
Honestly.
Hey, your kid dropped off some photographs. Remember your time with
your
wife?
I'm going to burn them.
Let me burn the photos of your dead kid.
Yeah. And I think oftentimes her version of comforting him, though, is often the opposite of her trying to help him accept that he's dying. It's like a prison of comfort, right? Because he gets to keep living the illusion with her rather than facing the light. And something I love also about this, and I don't know where this comes from in my life, and this is something emotional for sure. I love all the portrayal of men and tears in this movie. There's a lot of genuine male crying. Ving Rhames is super good in it.
Ving Rhames is so good.
And he has almost a speakingless part, right? But it's so good. And
I want more stuff like that.
Me too.
Let guys cry.
It's interesting because it's cathartic without any real context, which I love. Of course, they're all Vietnam vets, but I love that there's not this big exposition scene. It's all just pure feeling.
Yeah.
And the best directors do that, right? Yeah. This is a visual medium. It's not a novel.
Yep.
And so that works really well for me. Tim Robbins in the tub is awesome to me.
That stuck with me even when I watched it the first time.
Yes.
That was the only thing that I remembered. Right? And it's just nobody's listening to him. They're just piling the ice on top.
Right.
That's horror movie material.
And as they're pouring the ice on him, it's so cold that it's burning him.
Yeah, right? and he's saying it, but his voice is so faint, and everybody else is trying to help by hurting him more.
Yes.
And it just
And yeah, he keeps, whenever he tries to justify what's happening to him, it's an attempt for him to not accept, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So all the encounters with Jason Alexander, they're like, you never were a Vietnam vet. What are you talking about? And he's like, what? So all of his illusions are being shattered.
That moment too, I felt like they could have done a little bit more with.
I think so.
Of people saying you weren't even in Vietnam.
Now they did remake this movie a couple years ago.
I watched the remake.
And it is not good, in my opinion.
I watched the remake. They streamline it and make it very clear, kind of what you should think is happening.
And all the dark elements are bad too.
They make the grounding element in this, instead of a son that passed away who can eventually usher him to heaven, they give him a brother.
Yeah, no, that doesn't work at all.
I hated that remake.
Why did you watch it?
Oh, because I believe someone in self-torture. No, I was like, okay, how bad is this going to be? And I'll confess I didn't finish it because I do bow to opportunity cost. If the first 30 minutes of something sucks, there's not much good reason to think it'll save itself. Just walk out of the theater, you'll get your hour back. So yeah, I think that the big thing about Jacob's Ladder is the whole idea of the way up to heaven is through the darkness of hell to the light, right? Like that's a bastardization of a quote from Seven, but
no, that fits.
But it does, and they came out kind of around the same time, very similar like art direction. Mm-hmm. But I actually think Jacob's Ladder is the superior movie, but I like Seven. But yeah, it's all about acceptance of your final destination, right? Like this is something that most humans will experience, possibly all of them. We'll see what future technology does for us. Maybe we'll all have mind uploads. But up until this point, everyone's experienced death. And acceptance probably is the only way to do it with any kind of dignity. And this is something I worry about with myself. Like, how much dignity will I have on my way out? Will I go kicking and screaming, or will I have this acceptance? And I wouldn't say I'm nervous, because regardless of what I do, it's going to happen. But I'm hopeful that I'll have the dignity.
There was that Sony leak from 10 odd years ago where the Sony executive emails got hacked.
Right.
And like a third of it was just, God, I wish we didn't have to make more fucking Adam Sandler movies. Because like they hate them, but also they make a ton of money.
Yes,
so
they do.
It's like Adam Sandler's just doomed to keep making mediocre retreads of his former work, almost like a kind of purgatory, which brings us to Jacob's Ladder.
Good segue. Right. Well done.